Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Jason Davis with you, Soccer Morning. That is the sounds of Kiss, courtesy of our friend Iggy the Silverback. Yes, that's what he wants to be called. It's an entire rock block of Kiss today, everybody, courtesy of Iggy the Silverback. We are diving straight into the show today. Thank you very much to Iggy. By the way, check out soccermorning.com to find out how you can support the show. We don't have time. We've got to talk to Grant Wolf from Sports Illustrated, who's joining us right now to talk about the U.S. Women's National Team, the dismissal of Tom Sermanni as head coach. Grant, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great and even better after that intro music.
Oh, yeah? You're a Kiss guy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm not. So no offense to Iggy, no offense to anybody that loves Kiss. It's just not my bag, but it's fine. I can dig a little rock every now and then. All right, Grant. Tom Sermanni dismissed as a U.S. Women's National Team head coach. This was a shocking, the timing was shocking more than whether or not the reasons are sort of after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we were expecting or anyone was expecting, and including Tom Sermanni, who, when I got a hold of him about an hour after the press release went out, told me he was completely blindsided by it, which, he also said maybe he should have seen some things, but he was certainly surprised, and the rest of us were too. The press release comes out after 10 p.m. Eastern on a Sunday night, and so it's certainly not something you expect to see if you're covering the sport either.
That timing of that press release, is interesting. It certainly seems like the U.S. Soccer was trying to bury the news. It's not going to be buried. This is the most prominent women's national team in the world, and it's the most prominent head coaching job in the world. So, of course, it's going to be picked up. As from you, what you see in terms of what U.S. Soccer decided to do, and I know that Sunil Gulati addressed the media yesterday via conference call. Has any of this put them in a bad light? I mean, it's their right to dismiss a coach whenever they feel it's not working, but there is going to be some question about how they handled it.
Maybe a little bit, I mean, Tom Sermanni has been a class guy whenever I've dealt with him, and in my opinion, kind of publicly, and how he's handled this as well. At the same time, I don't think there was a huge legion of Tom Sermanni adorers out there among the U.S. fan base. So it's almost like he wasn't in charge long enough and for important enough games to really get much of a real response from U.S. fans who follow this team closely. I mean, he did go his first 20 games without losing, which is impressive with any team, including the U.S. team. And the two losses that came in a row at the Algarve last month, I think really started to, I guess, get people inside U.S. Soccer wondering if he should be the right man to continue. But I still thought that as bad as the Algarve was, it wasn't that big of a tournament and wouldn't be something that would cause him to lose his job.
The thinking on a lot of people's part, and certainly there are some people very in touch with the women's team and the player pool and certain individuals, was that this may have been something of a player mutiny. Now, Sunil Gulati downplayed that element of it without actually addressing whether or not certain players spoke out against Sermanni, and maybe they didn't demand he be fired, but if the players had a role in this, is that okay? I mean, Gulati says that he talks to players on both the women's and the men's team when coaching questions are in the air.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of Gulati, when he fired Bob Bradley as the men's coach, he took some time after the Gold Cup final loss in 2011, freely said that he spoke to players, and you have to assume that the players in that case had some influence over not keeping Bob Bradley. So, I mean, it's kind of out there now. I mean, Gulati said he spoke to some women's players. I guess the question people have is, was this initiated by U.S. women's players, or was it initiated by Gulati? There's certainly a history on this team. The 99ers had players try and actually initiate a movement with the U.S. Soccer president, Bob Contiguglia, at the time, to try and get April Heinrichs fired. And it didn't work. So, I guess maybe it's like splitting hairs a little bit when you think about, like, were U.S. women's players involved in this? Yes. Did that have an influence in getting Sermanni fired? Sounds like it. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows at this point if it was initiated by the players.
Two things stand out to me that are interesting. Number one, the significant differences, and rightfully so, between the standards for the men's team and the standards for the women's team. If a men's coach went through a brief stretch of struggle, the way Sermani did with the Algarve Cup, and whether or not things were clicking right away 14 months ahead of a World Cup, I find it very difficult to imagine that they would fire the men's team coach. And again, the women's have a high standard. The women's team has a high standard. And I guess my question on that part is whether or not U.S. soccer is maybe a little out of touch with the way the women's game is developing. I mean, I guess a high standard is all well and good, Grant, but if the rest of the world's getting better, and that means the women's team is not going to always dominate the way that they're expected to, is this too harsh on Tom Sermani?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, at the same time, I guess if you really are looking at what happened in the Algarve, giving up 5 goals against Denmark, more goals than the U.S. women have ever given up in a game, is that's distressing. And maybe the previous loss hurt Sermani even more because it was to Pia Sundhag's team, Sweden, and there's a direct reminder of the previous coach who, overall did pretty well with this team. So I don't know. I don't know what to take from it necessarily. I mean, like I tweeted last night that, using the criteria that Galati mentioned in his press conference yesterday, he probably would have fired Jurgen Klinsmann in February of 2013, given the dissatisfaction there was there. Obviously, different circumstances in the amount of money committed to Klinsmann that U.S. soccer would have had to eat in that case. And I'm sure that played a role. And also the fact that Klinsmann has kind of been Galati's guy for many, many years. And quite clearly, Tom Sermani had not earned that type of devotion from Galati.
Well, is there a coach out there in the world that could gain that type of devotion? And I guess part of this is timing, because the NWSL season is getting ready to kick off and coaches are already settled there. And there's certainly some options among those head coaches. Is the timing a problem for U.S. soccer?
Well, it certainly could be. I mean, I guess one question I've got now that Merritt Paulson is on the U.S. board of directors, or U.S. Soccer Board of Directors, and that was a recent appointment. Here, he could probably do a solid for U.S. Soccer if he's willing to let Paul Riley go, the coach of the Portland Thorns. And Riley was clearly a guy who was on the list the last time the U.S. hired a women's coach last year. So he's certainly one candidate. Curious to see which other ones pop up. But the fact is that whoever does get hired in this U.S. women's job is probably going to be someone that they thought Tom Sermani was a better candidate than just 13 months ago.
Well, I guess that then it gets down to the nuts and bolts there. And what exactly was the dissatisfaction with Sermani? I mean, forgiving the question of a player behind the scenes movement to push him out, whether that happened or not, there were some issues, and he certainly was tinkering with this team. Was it a function of, was the dissatisfaction a function of the tinkering, or was the tinkering not working?
Well, that's the question, I mean, Abby Wambach spoke here at SI about a month ago. It was right after the Algarve Cup problems, and talked about how he had many different lineups and that players had a hard time getting used to that in some cases. So you're trying to kind of read potentially little examples from things. And the other thing I'd heard is just that Sermani is a very laid back guy and was not as engaged with the team as Pia Sundhag was when she was the coach. So it's a matter of taste. Some players respond better to one way of management. Other players respond better to another. And, maybe we'll learn more about which players chafed under Sermani's management style. Maybe we won't. I mean, U.S. Soccer's pretty clearly tried to control the message the last couple of days.
I guess only time will tell whether this is the correct decision to make. And again, the World Cup qualifying coming up at the end of this year, towards the end of this year, and then the World Cup next year, assuming the women qualify. That would be an absolute disaster, of course, if they didn't qualify. And look, the rivalry with Canada is obviously it was obviously percolating the last couple of years. Whether or not Canada is going to be on that level when they host the World Cup is an open question. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on the U.S. women to go and win that tournament. And again, I mean, if Sermani wasn't the right guy, or Sermani was the right guy then, who's the right person now to take this team to that next level? I'm kind of at a loss here, Grant.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, if this had been a few months ago, you might have said, well, Cindy Parlow-Cone just took the Portland Thorns to the NWSL title. Maybe she would be a candidate, but then she resigned and they replaced her. So, women's soccer, it's an interesting landscape at this point. I mean, I look at some other national team coaches from around the world, and I kind of like John Herdman, the guy who's the Canada coach, but he's locked up for long term in his deal up there. You look at Riley in Portland, and he's a guy who maybe has a shot at this job, especially if he can get out of his contract up there. Mm-hmm. It's a little up in the air. I don't think there's an obvious candidate right now to come in for this job.
I'm going to ask I'm going to try to phrase this correctly and be as delicate as I can. And this is an issue that has presented itself in women's basketball before, but it seems that there's a double standard. Men can coach women's sports, but women can't really coach men's sports. It's certainly not something that the culture has dealt with head on. Is there a sense that there is a batch of women's soccer coaches and that you can't branch out from that group? And again, regardless of gender, I'm just asking about the pool that's available.
Well, that's a great question. Would it be fun to see Marcela Bielsa coach the U.S. women's national team? Yes, it certainly would. I'd love to observe that. But if I don't think he's on the list.
Sure.
So,
and money's a factor. We know that there's different money involved here.
Right. And, this gets back to the old Anson Dorrance thing about coaching women being completely different from coaching men, and that you have to have a real understanding of how women's teams work. And I do think there is something to that, but I also think there's no reason that Pia Sundhage couldn't coach a men's team. Mm-hmm. I also think there's no reason that Marcela Bielsa couldn't coach a women's team. I'd like to see more of that kind of thing happen, actually.
Yeah, no, it would certainly mix things up and make things more fun. Again, I mean, it's a complete double standard. At least in the men's game, you'll have Paul Riley's a candidate for this job. We just saw Tom Sermani, the last head coach, and you're unlikely, so unlikely, and it'll make worldwide news when there's a third division team in Argentina or Peru or Chile that has a woman coach. I mean, that's just the lay of the land right now. Again, complete double standard. Grant Wall from Sports Illustrated joining us to talk about Tom Sermani's dismissal from the U.S. women's national team and what's next. Grant, I know you've got a busy day. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Jason. Take care.
There goes. All right. Thank you to Grant Wall from Sports Illustrated joining us to talk about Tom Sermani's dismissal from the U.S. women's national team. Again, this is a developing story. The U.S. women have a very high standard to measure up to, and everything that's said about Tom Sermani is that he's the most humble, down to earth, engaging type of guy that you could ever meet. So this obviously isn't about his personality and him as a person. It's about whatever fit was going on there with the national team. We saw some quotes clearly from anonymous sources via Stephen Goff and some others that said that certain figures within the women's team thought there was no direction and no plan in place, and perhaps that's on Sermani in that he did not communicate exactly where he was going with that team. All right, let's get into this. Phone lines are open, 347-756-6276. Again, thank you to Grant for joining us today. We've got a big show. We've got Jason Longshore and Daniel Monroe, both been on the board of the Terminus Legion, the supporters group, the fan group down in Atlanta Big couple of days for them as the word leaks out that that Atlanta will be getting an MLS team in the near future. Announcement coming on April 16th is the word. And then later on in the show, Curtis Larson from the Toronto Sun will join us to talk TFC. 313, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason. Just want to talk. This is Oscar Pittsburgh. Just want to talk about Tom Samani getting axed by U.S. Soccer. I think this is nothing, just a knee-jerk reaction, and it sounds like, influenced by the players after, their poor performance at the Algarve Cup. But, I think, these players got spoiled a bit under Pia Sundhage, who took every international tournament as if it was, the last tournament they would ever play, while Tom Samani took that opportunity to develop, to see players like Megan Klingenberg and all those and Morgan Bryan, see how they would shape up on the international stage. And I think when we did so poorly there, I think the big stars on the U.S. women's team got nervous, right. And here we are. He was trying to develop players.
You point
which
to.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Isaac. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It was just a completely different system than with Pia Sundhage, who stuck to her guns, for years on end. Not giving, famously not giving players like Alex Morgan a chance until the very last moment that she could. While Tom Samani is, I should say, getting on the ball.
Yeah. You know what, Isaac? You think you point to an interesting cultural conundrum within the U.S. women's national team. Again, the bar is extremely high. This is supposed to be the best women's team in the world. And when they come up short of that goal in whatever tournament they're participating in, whatever game they're playing, it causes a ripple effect. And at the same time, you hire a guy like Tom Sermanni and you give him a mandate, at least publicly, of changing things, of trying things out, of deepening the player pool. And then when that doesn't work because, hey, you know what? This is change. This is different. This is inexperienced players coming in. Then you're going to come back on them and say, no, this isn't working out. We're letting you go. You either want to develop what Tom Sermanni was trying to do or you don't. And I'm not saying he's the right guy. And I'm not even saying that his firing was unjustified. I'm just wondering if the culture allows for the experimentation that they say they want.
One thing I think maybe the biggest parallel I've seen between the U.S. women's team and the U.S. men's team is that as soccer on the global stage develops, we remain stagnant. Now, the women have gotten away with it because we have kept on getting success to a certain degree on the international stage. But you use that keyword develop.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Samani was just he was doing just that. But then I keep on thinking about these quotes from Abby Wambach saying how much since she's never won a World Cup and that's the number one thing on her mind. I guess that mentality, if others on the team share it, just got the best of them, and they put the pressure on Sunil, and here we are.
Yeah, no, I do. I definitely think that there is a different scale and a different set of rules in place for the women's than there is. For calling in. All right. While we're here, I think if we're good and we're on the air and our connection is stable. While we're here, let's talk about Luther Campbell. If you don't know who Luther Campbell is a former fan of Two Live Crew, noted rap impresario, Miami native, and unapologetic booster of the University of Miami football team. That's Luther Campbell, Uncle Luke, Luke Skywalker, whatever you want to call him. Luke Campbell is now on the record at the MiamiNewTimes.com as coming out against the David Beckham Stadium plan at Port Miami. I don't know what that means. I don't know what kind of influence Luke wields within the city of Miami. Certainly one of the most prominent residents and native sons of that city, only because he makes himself prominent. He has written an op-ed piece at the Miami New Times in which he says, don't give celebrities Miami stuff, essentially. Now, he uses a couple of other examples to sort of say Miami is starstruck, the mayor and that the city council and people around the Miami area are too enthralled with celebrity. Your lead from Luther Campbell. In Miami, having a celebrity as a frontman practically guarantees politicians will approve a public boondoggle. Indeed, it seems Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez is ready to hand over prime waterfront land owned by the taxpayers to global soccer star David Beckham. The British football icon recently unveiled his vision for a soccer stadium at Port Miami. Beckham has even sweetened the pot, claiming he's talking to the University of Miami about moving the soccer team's home games out of Sun Life Stadium. I'm not really sure. I haven't heard that part, but okay. His cronies are starstruck. Small African-American owned businesses can't get a minute on the mayor's calendar, but a multimillionaire soccer player can ask for the port and get it. That's ridiculous. He goes on to point to a couple of examples from the recent past of celebrities and famous athletes getting their way when it comes to boondoggles, as Luther calls them. Notes that in 2001, Emerson Fittipaldi, the famous race car driver, was given the ability to turn the streets of downtown Miami into a Grand Prix course, tearing up sidewalks, et cetera. 2003, they sold their interest, Emerson Fittipaldi and the men he was partnered with, sold their interest for $1.2 million to a motorsports company that folded, leaving debt on the city and the Sports Authority. And he talks about Hialeah Mayor Carlos Hernandez allowing Orlando Hernandez, El Duque from the New York Yankees, to have a no-bid contract on baseball fields in a Hialeah park, and El Duque subsequently locked him up and charged people to use them. I don't know this history. I'm only telling you what Luther is talking about here, what Uncle Luke is talking about. But it's interesting. It's fascinating that Luther Campbell's coming out against this. Now, I don't know if this means anything in the grand scheme. I do know that there seems to be an uptick in the amount of opposition to David Beckham and the Port Miami idea. Now, that was always going to come. There was always going to be opposition. Anytime the local government and taxpayer money is on the line, or taxpayer land, or however you want to view this, is on the line. Look, in D.C. United is trying to work out a land swap deal with the city government. Now, there's no money being committed, just land. But then again, that is represented, that has a value, and therefore it is money. And it seems like a relatively straightforward, relatively fair deal. Anytime the public's interest is involved in helping a private concern get a stadium, people are going to be upset. That's what we got here in Miami. And now Uncle Luke is on the side of the anti-stadium brigade. I just find that amazing. I'm not going to play any 2 Live Crew. I'm not going to play any Uncle Luke right now on the show. I kind of want to balance out the kiss, but I'm not going to do that. Go check this story out. It's MiamiNewTimes.com. Will Miami bend it for Beckham? Uncle Luke writing this piece, I guess. I like this. Here's his finish. It seems you have to be famous for these politicians to help you. Either that or have a bag full of cash for their re-election campaigns. I could be wrong, of course. They might say no to Beckham. Only time will tell. He's obviously pretty adamant about this. I have an interview request, Trevor. Can we book Luther Campbell? Is that possible? Can we book Luther Campbell on this show? That would be the most amazing guest in the history of Soccer Morning if we make that happen. Damn. Go to soccermorning.com and support the show so that we can figure out a way to get Luther Campbell on the air and talk soccer with Luther Campbell. Talk stadiums at least. Another bit of news I'll get to before we get Jason Longshore and Daniel Monroe on the line. Speaking of Atlanta, the Silverbacks, the future of the Silverbacks, the NASL, Bill Peterson, commissioner of the NASL, who I believe, and I have to check my email because I was invited and I haven't responded because I haven't had time. I don't think I'll be able to do it. But Bill Peterson is going to be talking to the media. The NASL season opening up this weekend. Big season for the NASL. They're launching a subscription service to watch games online, very much like MLS Live. Seen a little bit of grousing about the price. We're gonna dig into that a little bit more. I don't have any particular insight into it right now, but I do know the NASL is going to make their games available online via subscription service. I think it's $30 for the year, something like that. But he did a Q&A with the San Antonio, with mysanantonio.com. Dan McCarney with the Q&A with Bill Peterson. He talks a little bit about expansion. He talks a little bit about the issues that NASL has with MLS coming into markets where NASL has a presence. Here's a question. What about the possibility with New York and Atlanta and Minneapolis of either losing key markets or sharing them with the MLS teams? I like Bill's response. The first thing, I can't control anything another league does, fortunately or unfortunately, however you view it. Those teams in their divisions aren't determined by competition, but by teams making market decisions. Each city is a little different. In some, it's probably a little bit better, and we can actually compete with them. In others, there's doubt whether there's enough room for more than one club. All of our owners are evaluating the information as we get it. We just have to wait and see what the reaction is locally. So I imagine that applies to the Silverbacks. I can't imagine Atlanta supporting the Silverbacks and an MLS team. We'll talk to the Terminus Legion boys about that. See what the future is of the Silverbacks. There's another little nugget in here. And this relates to something that I heard years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago when the NASL was starting up after the split from USL. NASL could go into the Dallas market. I would find that fascinating. Now, obviously, FC Dallas plays in Frisco, which is not that close to downtown Dallas. If somehow NASL, and obviously their standards are a little different, and they could find a stadium that holds 5,000, 10,000 people and be comfortable. Maybe they're playing on turf. Maybe they're playing in a high school football stadium. That's a little different. MLS team probably wouldn't go with that deal. I mean, FC Dallas has a history of bouncing around that city a little bit. Cotton Bowl and some high school stadium. I can't remember what it was called. Now they're in Frisco. Is there room in Dallas for an NASL team? Would it be successful? What would that mean for the relationship between MLS and NASL? Again, all is fair here. If MLS is going to go into markets where NASL already has teams and expand to Atlanta, expand to the Miami market with Fort Lauderdale up the road, expand to some of these cities where the NASL already has a presence and in some cases established teams, hey, NASL might as well take a shot at Dallas. Whether it is an open question whether or not FC Dallas has captured that entire market soccer-wise. Doesn't seem like it. And then wouldn't the U.S. Open Cup be fun when those teams face off? FC Dallas versus the Dallas Tornadoes or whatever they're going to call them in the NASL. That would be amazing. It would make the soccer landscape that much richer. I'm not sure the competition is great, but it would definitely make the soccer landscape that much richer and more interesting. All right, let's take a break. Ooh, that is not what I wanted to do. Let's try this again. There we go. There's your kiss. When we come back, Daniel Monroe, Jason Longshore, board members from Terminus Legion, the MLS supporters group in Atlanta will join us. We'll talk through the issues there, the doubts, the concerns, and can it be a success? Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, soccermorning.com.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, join on the telephone. Let's get that Atlanta perspective. I got a little bit of feedback from some people. Weren't too happy. We needed to talk to some people from Atlanta, get the thoughts of people down there who know the soccer world in that part of the country. Jason Longshore, Daniel Monroe, board members at Terminus Legion, which is the supporters group that's popped up to help bring MLS to Atlanta, and apparently they're going to be successful. Jason, Daniel, how are you guys?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having us.
Doing great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
All right, guys. You'll have to determine who's going to answer these questions, but I got a lot of thoughts here on Atlanta. I did an hour on this subject yesterday. People are very concerned outside of the area there that this team can be a success. So I put to you immediately, how much support is there for an MLS soccer team in the city of Atlanta, Georgia?
This is Jason. I think there's a surprising amount of support for soccer in Atlanta. It's grown really quickly over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. I mean, I was born in Atlanta. I've grown up here. I remember the days with the Atlanta Ruckus where we played in a high school stadium with 4,000 people, and that was a packed house. And we're way past that, and a lot of it has been the special events that we've hosted with Mexico playing a game here almost yearly and drawing record numbers. The last one sold out the Georgia Dome. Growing interest with the Silverbacks and professional soccer. It's been a lot of building blocks, and I think we're at the point to where an MLS team can really bring together the Atlanta soccer community in a huge way.
All right, Daniel, I'll ask you this part of the question then. Based on the response that we've seen, and I'm sure you guys are very much aware of the skepticism, do you understand some of that skepticism, and do you buy that the burden of proof is going to be on you guys to prove that this team can be successful?
Yeah, I understand the skepticism. Whenever you go into any new market, it's almost always a show me what you can do before we believe what you can do. And so I think that it's up to us to be able to build the fan base here and get people to turn out not only for MLS games in the future, but for the Silverbacks games now and for any international friendlies or games like that we get. But yeah, I can see where they're coming from. I wouldn't think that Miami, right off the top of my head, would be a great market, but I think that you have to give them time to prove that they're right. Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. And I think that Atlanta could end up being a very good market for MLS.
Jason, back to you. I think part of the question for a lot of people, it's not just about Atlanta as a sports town. It's not just about Atlanta as a soccer town. It's about the setup here, the specific notion of putting an MLS team in Arthur Blank Falcon Stadium with the bed sheets and the odd setup and the plastic grass. I mean, that's not perfect. How much of an impediment to success are those elements going to be?
I think a lot of people are underestimating Arthur Blank. If you go back and you look at when he bought the Falcons, this was early 2000s. The Falcons, were that franchise that a lot of people still kind of think they are. Not drawing well, not well supported, not much of a presence in the community. And from the minute he bought the team, he changed that. I mean, the attendance went up almost overnight. He did some very smart things. They've been very involved in the community. And the thing that I like about the way he's built the Falcons that I think will cross over to the MLS team, he always looks big picture. He's never a guy who will bring in a player, make a move that is for just immediate gratification and won't last. He's always looking big picture, and he builds a team to succeed over the long haul. And I think that's going to be the approach he has with the MLS team. He's had soccer people in the Falcons organization since the mid-2000s, when he first started looking at expansion, the round that Montreal and Seattle and Portland came in. So he's been preparing for this for a long time. It's not just I want an MLS team. His son is also a big-time player here with Concord Fire, and he's been very involved in youth soccer as well. So it's not just a hobby to him. And that's the thing I think a lot of people are overlooking.
So we are underestimating Arthur Blank's soccer credentials.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. And obviously, again, burden of proof. He's got to prove it, just like the fans have to prove it by showing up. But part of that element is him connecting with the the soccer community and mobilizing those fans to that game. And I know, Jason, you focused on the Mexico friendlies, and that's obviously a sign that there are people willing to travel to Atlanta. I'm not sure how all of them are from there, but they're willing to travel to Atlanta for a game. But we can't necessarily, and we've seen this in the past in other markets, and I guess, Daniel, you can talk about this, we can't necessarily connect Mexico support to anything that's going to be happening 17, 18 times a year in a stadium for an MLS team.
Exactly. MLS has been trying for a long time to be able to crack sort of the Hispanic market, and has done so with varying degrees of success, to be generous. But I think that eventually it will happen. I mean, just like American kids who maybe weren't into soccer in the 90s, we grow up, we've been around MLS for most of our lives now. We are becoming major and big fans of the league. The more Hispanic kids in the area that grow up in the U.S. being exposed to the league, they're going to become more fans of the league. And once we can crack that nut, Atlanta has a huge, booming, growing Hispanic marketplace. And so I think you could look at it down the road as a way to measure future growth. But right now, yes, it's just sort of like there are people here who like soccer, but do they really like MLS?
I think that's another part of this. And we got some of that sentiment on Twitter and via phone call yesterday, guys. It was the South doesn't like soccer. Now, I've lived in the South a little bit. It's been a long time. It's been nearly 20 years now, but soccer was on the rise then. I imagine it's much bigger now. Is that a fair statement? The South doesn't like soccer?
No, it's not. I mean, I've seen it, through my work with soccer in the streets. There's so much more respect and interest in the game, and so many more new, both kids and young adults are playing. I mean, there is soccer going on all over Atlanta every day of the week in every type of community you can imagine. It's grown leaps and bounds. I think the thought that people say the South doesn't like soccer would probably be thinking of old school backwards thinking that it's just not true. And Atlanta doesn't really represent that anyway. Atlanta is such an international city. It's been such a hub for new business, for young startups. It's not the prototypical South that people think of.
All right, Daniel, if I made you the marketing director of the new Atlanta MLS team today, what would your first step be in order to get people excited about this team, and how are you going to get people out to the stadium?
The first thing I would do is I would probably do a public Q&A with Arthur, get him out there and let him show how much he cares about this sport and wanted to make the team a success with the people who are going to put their butts in the seats. Beyond that, I think that, you'd have to try to maybe do something with the Silverbacks. I don't know if that's really a possibility, but it wouldn't hurt to, try to ingratiate yourself with the current team in town. But with the animosity between the two leagues, I don't think that would probably go over too well right now for the Silverbacks.
Go ahead.
Saying? I would also try to, it's 3 years before we have a team. I think, having, getting the team name out as soon as you can, the kits, that way people can start, representing the team in the market, and just sort of getting, using the fans as your best marketing tool. I think that's the best thing that MLS can do, as you can see with Kansas City, Portland, Seattle. Really try to just ingratiate yourself amongst the hardcore fans and let them sort of be your evangelicals out of the community.
That's good stuff there. And I guess that leads me into a question about the Silverbacks and where this leaves the Silverbacks and what the relationship might be or might not be. And frankly, guys, and Jason, I guess you can answer this, what is the Terminus Legion relationship to the Silverbacks?
Terminus Legion has always been about supporting Atlanta soccer at all levels. Terminus Legion will be involved in Silverbacks games this year. The Silverbacks have been very receptive and very supportive of Terminus Legion's growth. So that's going to be something where you'll start to see a Terminus Legion presence at Silverbacks games this season, starting with the home opener on the 19th.
And the future of the Silverbacks, from your perspective, I guess it's all about whether or not they work with this team, but they're not going to incorporate. They're not going to come together in this team. There's really no thought that the MLS entry is going to be the Atlanta Silverbacks.
No, it's there's a lot of history there, and it's going to be interesting to see how the new MLS team can, possibly take advantage of that. I know there hasn't been a lot of conversations between the two ownership groups. I don't know if that will change. Having a team playing in that gap between announcing the MLS team and the team launching in 2017, it is something to look at, and maybe it's a way where they can strike a partnership to get the ball rolling. I'm not sure, though.
All right, Daniel, one of the issues presented also by fans who are doubtful of this endeavor yesterday on this show was sort of the notion that in Atlanta, and this is the South in general, and I pointed out that Atlanta is a regional city in a way that a lot of MLS towns are not. One of the issues is sort of breaking through the sports clutter, and it's not just the Braves and the Falcons and the Hawks in town. It's also about SEC football and getting outside of that and getting some attention. How likely is it that soccer is going to get, it doesn't have to be front page, but get enough attention to get people aware of what's happening?
I think that it's very likely. Like I said, I think that a lot of this keys on the man doing it, Arthur Blank. He has great relationships with the media in this city. I think that one of the things that the Seahawks did well was the Sounders did well was leveraging their relationship with the Seahawks and sort of helping use that machinery to get the word out, and using those relationships to help get a little bit more publicity than, say, a team that is just a standalone franchise. So I think that Arthur can do that. I don't think this will ever be as big as the NFL or SEC football down here, and I don't think anybody would be offended by that. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you look at the way the demographics are growing in this area, I think that they are very soccer friendly, and the more people you have that care about soccer, the more and more pressure will be on the AJC and sports talk radios and news stations to give soccer the coverage that it deserves.
Now, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Jason. That's something that I've actually been really surprised about since the announcement, since the news broke. 680, for example, had been advertised. 680 The Fan is one of the bigger sports talk stations here in Atlanta, and they've been advertising a Q&A with Arthur Blank last week before the announcement. Yesterday, they were leading off advertising that Q&A with, he's bringing a Major League Soccer team, ask him about it, ask questions. Well, I've been really excited about that support because we used to not get that.
That'll be interesting to pay attention to today. The issue of the Braves and their move out of the city proper into, I believe it's Cobb County, if I have my geography correct. Does that have any impact on the possibility of this team being successful, unsuccessful, or is it immaterial?
I think it has a huge impact because Cobb County, if you look at it on a map, it's not that far from downtown Atlanta. When you factor in traffic, it's going to be more difficult for people who live in the city and south of the city to go to as many Braves games as they used to. And now you have an opportunity to pitch it that you have an MLS team moving into downtown. And downtown Atlanta is really growing right now. There are just so many things going on with a new streetcar, with more transit opportunities. There's a lot going on. So being downtown, I think, is really critical for this being successful. And that gives you a counterpoint to the Braves move.
One of the go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were from. Go ahead.
One other thing to add is that while the Braves are leaving downtown, you're having a big spike in the number of young professionals moving into sort of the city proper who will want something to do. And those are already MLS's key target demos. If you look at the growth of attendance over the last few years. And so they're going to need something to do. And without the Braves being right down the street and the MLS team is, I think you're going to get a whole lot more people just choosing on a random Saturday to walk up and buy tickets for the MLS team than maybe if there was a Braves a half a mile down the road.
From the Terminus Legion perspective, what do you guys hope for in terms of your relationship with this team and how important is it? I guess this is an obvious answer, but I guess I'm looking for some details on how you hope this goes. How important is it for this team to be engaged with groups like Terminus Legion?
I think it's really important. And I think, luckily we have a group that recognizes that. And I've been extremely happy thus far with the relationship between, the Falcons organization and Terminus Legion. They've, been up front in wanting to include Terminus Legion in announcements and in events. And that's something that I see no reason why it wouldn't continue. So thus far, we've been really happy with it.
The other question: are we going to have football lines on this field, guys? Is this going to be a problem?
I wish I could make that call because I would not. But unfortunately, I'm not painting.
I think a lot of people are going to take this, and we'll leave off with this, guys. I think a lot of people are going to take whether or not there are football lines on the field, and there's some overlap, not a ton of overlap between the Falcon season and the MLS season, but we've seen it in Seattle and other places. People are going to take that as an indication of whether or not Arthur Blank is really serious about soccer or whether he's crafting it, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Well, just one thing is that, Seattle has the lines on the field from time to time, and nobody thinks that they aren't serious about the team. So I think that people can look at it that way and try to portray Arthur Blank as the crafts, but I think that they can just as easily look at it in the same way and say the Sounders do it too, and it doesn't hurt their credibility at all.
Sure, but they have 40,000 people in the stands. You guys aren't going to get. You're not going to get 40,000 people in the stands, and that's not the goal.
That is correct. We'll be happy if we could sell out the lower bowl, which is
just under 30. Yeah, 25 to 30, depending on how they arrange it.
Well, that's
I can tell you that we'll be fighting really hard, and making it very clear that we should not have football lines at any point. Is it my decision? No, but we'll definitely be putting that voice out there.
Hopefully somebody asks Arthur Blank that in the Q&A that's happening 680 The Fan in Atlanta. Since that's been suggested, go ask him soccer questions. Jason Longshore, Daniel Monroe from the Terminus Legion. By the way, guys, what's the membership right now, and how fast are you guys growing?
We just hit our 250th member today. We're up about 35 since Saturday, and we launched in early January. So we are happy with our growth so far.
Okay, and is there the website terminuslegion.com, I'm assuming?
.com.
There you go.
And, you
guys want to pitch real quick?
Yeah, just come on out to Terminus Legion. You follow us on Twitter at Terminus Legion and follow us on our Facebook page. We're a great group of soccer supporters, and that's what we are. We're supporters. We care more about making sure that we represent the city well, we help in the community, and that we support all levels of local soccer, no matter they're from the Pee Wee to the MLS and anything in between.
Daniel and Jason, appreciate your time this morning. Congratulations. Looking forward to the 16th, the day everybody's targeting. Nothing from MLS officially yet, but this is, it looks like it's happening. Congratulations on Atlanta getting MLS.
We're excited. Thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it.
There go Daniel and Jason from Terminus Legion. They are the guys behind the supporters group, the grassroots effort to gather people together in support of MLS in Atlanta. They've got their announcement, or they've got their report. This is still a report. No reason to doubt that it's happening, but it's still a report. And until MLS comes out officially, and we're only 8 days away from that official announcement as reported. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this moves along, what Arthur Blank does. And again, the suggestion that people go and ask Arthur Blank questions about the soccer team in Atlanta is a good sign. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a success, but there's little pebbles here. And again, we're trying to make a wall out of this that indicates there's going to be significant support in Atlanta and that this team can be successful. All right. The docket today, the soccer docket today, you've got 2 Champions League games I imagine you'll be paying attention to. Are you guys going to be watching these Champions League games, despite the fact that both of them, the score lines would indicate that they're sort of foregone conclusions? But that's not necessarily the case, especially at Stamford Bridge as Chelsea hosts PSG. Remember, no Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Chelsea down 2 goals on aggregate. They've got that away goal in their pocket. They scored 2, they go through. They score 2 and keep PSG off the board. They go through. Is that possible? Yeah, sure it is. It's absolutely possible. And Chelsea doing it with smoke and mirrors up top. No real significant forward threat. Okay, Samuel Eto'o. All right, sure. Why not? Dortmund-Madrid is the game that seems less likely to turn around. Dortmund down 3 goals after the first leg in Madrid. Real Madrid, the juggernaut, look like they are on their way to the semifinals. And then from there, it's hard not to make them one of the favorites to win the whole thing. If we ended up with a Bayern Munich-Real Madrid final, I don't think anybody would complain, would they? This isn't exactly 7 and 8 seeds going at it at the end of the tournament. This is the 2 best teams in the world as it looks on paper right now. It doesn't mean that Real Madrid is going to go on and win La Liga, by the way. They could still stumble. They're not. Where are the standings right now? Let me pull up La Liga standings. I don't hold these in my head at all times. I probably should. What's the current La Liga standings look like? Atleti's on top. 3 points over Real Madrid. 1 point over Barcelona. Real Madrid in 3rd place. I mean, yeah, they've got some work to do, and they need Atleti and Barcelona to drop some points between now and the end of the season if they're going to win La Liga. But they still look like, at least attacking wise, one of the best teams in the world. And Bayern Munich, Real Madrid in the final is hard to top. They got to get past Dortmund today. They got to finish Dortmund off today, and obviously PSG. Is it fair to call PSG a dark horse? Can you call a team that has spent that much money on players and is backed by Qatari oil dollars? Can you call them is it fair to call them a dark horse? It doesn't seem appropriate, really. Doesn't really seem like it would fit. Curtis Larson from the Toronto Sun will join us in a couple of minutes. Talk about the Toronto FC season to this point. The impact of Michael Bradley, the insane impact of Michael Bradley, scored his first league goal over the weekend against the Columbus Crew. The fact that team beat Columbus, who had started so hot, without Daniil Henry, without Jonathan Osorio. He didn't play either, did he? Without Jermaine Defoe. They got by with a rookie and Bradley Orr in their center back pairing. Hagelin and Orr in their center back pairing, and they ended up beating Columbus 2-0 and making it look relatively easy. Come on. Still MLS. It's still competitive games. Michael Bradley with a fantastic goal. And then they backed it up. Got a second. Got an insurance goal and went on to win that game. And currently, while they go, it's a bit of an up and down. Beaten by RSL last weekend pretty handily. Sort of a come back to earth moment after their good start. Here's what a really good MLS team looks like. Real Salt Lake, bang, 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 3-0 loss. Then they go to Columbus. Not an easy place to play. Columbus, a team that has shown very, very well to start the season. New outlook in Columbus. New way of playing. And they beat Columbus 2-0. Good stuff. You get Curtis Larson's talk on that, take on that. And there's rumors, at least in Toronto, I don't know how legitimate these are, and this is another thing to ask Curtis about, that Brek Shea could be coming back to MLS, and maybe Toronto's interested. Can they add him? That would be an allocation order situation, right? Somebody quick, get me the current allocation order for Major League Soccer. Speaking of U.S. national team players who could come back or could benefit from a return to MLS, certainly Brek Shea's on that list. Josie Altidore is probably on that list right now. Is anybody going to deny that Josie Altidore might not benefit from a return to Major League Soccer after the disastrous season that he's endured in Sunderland? It's been bad. And he was dropped to the U21 team yesterday as Sunderland went to White Hart Lane and just got tonked. Just got demolished by Spurs. Sunderland's going down. Sunderland's going down. I don't see any real hope here based on the way that they're playing. Apparently going to go down without Josie Altidore up top. Or without Josie Altidore on the bench. Let's send Josie Altidore to the U21s. Reports from that game, not the best. No excuses here. No more excuses. It's not going well. It's not a good fit. He's playing poorly. Attitude may or may not be good. How can it possibly be good? Maybe a return to MLS is in the cards for Josie Altidore. How much would it cost to get Josie Altidore back to MLS? Right off the top of my head, you tell me if these numbers sound right or wrong to you. Thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of a $5 million transfer fee. And then you're going to have to pay him 7 figures. You're going to have to pay him north of $1 million, probably more than that. I don't know, 1.5, 1.2. What's MLS? What's Josie Altidore worth to MLS? Because he's worth more here than he is anywhere else. Remember that. Remember that he is going to come at a premium to MLS because he's American, because he's a national teamer. He's probably going to play in the World Cup. That's going to affect it. And again, he could benefit from it. This is a situation where we've watched Michael Bradley come back. He's playing fantastic soccer right now. Maybe Clint Dempsey is finally working his way around to it. I'm not going to call that a done deal that Clint is back to his old self. He's probably not the height of his powers anymore, but he's playing well enough. Hat-trick on the weekend. Trevor's got a great point about the end of the season when Sunderland does go down, because guess what? Sunderland's going down. They'll be looking to chop some of their salary. Get that wage bill down. So they could be willing to sell Josie Altidore to MLS at a discount rate. Again, worth more to MLS. But here's the thing. If somebody else comes in for him, we'll see. Somebody else comes in for him, could drive up the price. And again, would Josie Altidore be amenable to the return to MLS? Because this is the guy who set the transfer record for an American player twice. And now look, in retrospect, it was a terrible decision. I think a lot of people identified it as a bad decision to start with. That maybe England wasn't the place for Josie to go, and maybe pick a different team than Sunderland if you're going to go back to England. If that's the only team that was interested, then fine, pass on England. Because I can't imagine it was his only option ahead of the campaign. He did so well in Holland. Did so well at AZ Alkmaar. And it's all been brought back down to earth. It's all crumbled now in the face of a terrible, terrible team. Terrible team. Terrible, terrible team. Sunderland. So hard to watch. Let's take a break. When we come back, let's do this. When we come back, we will talk to Curtis Larson from the Toronto Sun. Get his take on TFC to this point. Breck Shea coming back. We'll see what happens. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, soccermorning.com.
Oh, what a ride, carrying such a heavy load.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Thanks to Iggy the Silverback, fitting for today's program. Iggy the Silverback with our KISS playlist. It's a rock block, everybody. On the line with me now, Curtis Larson from the Toronto Sun. Talk a little TFC, MLS. Hi, Kurt. How are you, man?
Hey, good, man. Good to be back.
Good to have you. Let's talk about TFC. I just kind of laid it out there. The reality check, so to speak, against RSL. This is what a well-drilled machine looks like in MLS. It's Real Salt Lake. Kind of get tonked on the road. Then they go on the road to Columbus, and there's something of a rivalry there, although I have my doubts over whether or not it's real. And they make I don't know if it's a statement. Is it fair to call this a statement, Curtis?
I mean, I think it's fair to call it a statement against everybody who countered them out. I mean, first one to hold their hand up is me saying, I didn't give them a chance going into this game, especially after you said, like the RSL 3-0 loss and really not even really looking like they're even part of that game. But they go in, they're missing pieces. They go in with the right tactics. I think Columbus kind of played into their hands a little bit. I thought Greg Berhalter made a few mistakes in that game, but it's one of those games where a few weeks ago they were the best thing. Then after RSL, they were the worst thing in the world. Right. And now in Toronto's fickle market, they're back to being one of the talking points now that the Maple Leafs are out of the playoffs, probably.
Well, there is the truth of that, which is that they're probably somewhere in between, being the greatest thing and the worst thing, and more than likely what they're aiming for and what fans will be excited about, whether it's 5th or 3rd or 1st, is a playoff appearance. At least for now, that seems to be on track.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most bizarre part of that Columbus game was that they were missing their captain, another starting center back, their starting attacking mid, and a few more pieces. And so, of course, anybody who followed this league through the first month of the season would think Columbus, undefeated, is going to go in, and go ahead and clean up. But, some players stepped up. Bradley Orr and the draft pick Hadland were, fantastic at the back. But like I said, I think Columbus played into their hands a little bit. They had something like 40 crosses that game. And when you got two players in the middle like that, like Orr and Hadland, who are ball winners, they just ate everything up. And Columbus really struggled to get anything going through the middle, with Higuain and stuff. And I think that was part of Nelson's tactics, was to push everything wide, make everything a 50-50 in the box, and Toronto won out.
Interesting to consider the possibilities for Columbus and whether or not Greg Berhalter has a plan B, because plan A has worked so well until this game. But you mentioned those guys that stepped up, Hagelin or clearly Becker played well as well in the middle next to Bradley. This indicates that Toronto might have more depth than we thought, or is this what you would have expected?
I think it definitely indicates they had more depth. I mean, we thought they were dead in the water when Caldwell got suspended and Henry went down with that knock. I mean, you're playing a first-year player and a guy in Orr who hasn't really looked comfortable in the early part of the season. You're playing those two guys in the back. You'd expect a guy like Higuain to go ahead and eat him up. I think Columbus might have fallen short in their game plan. I think they should have started Arrieta up top to kind of play with Adoro. Adoro never got in behind Toronto's back four, which was kind of bizarre to me. But like you said, the depth, it's there, but I think they also need to worry about some other things. Michael Bradley's going to be going to the World Cup. We keep saying that. Do they have a replacement for him right now? I don't think so. Jermaine Defoe's looking like he could go to the World Cup now with all the injuries in England. Do they have a replacement for that? No, they might be okay with Gilberto up top. So there's still questions unanswered, but I think the club is in a lot better place than we thought they were heading into last Saturday.
Well, I mean, let's spare some time and talk about Michael Bradley, because once again, he was excellent and he has lived up to the billing. Is he worth the money that they're paying him in MLS? It's a good question, but at least he is making people forget that he is paid at such an insane level because he's backing it up with his performances.
Yeah, and he's paid what he's paid because he's marketable. I mean, everybody in the U.S. now is following Toronto FC. I was on a flight back from Seattle after the opener, and there was a story in Alaskan Airlines about Michael Bradley. This is a Toronto player, so it's kind of bizarre to see that. But, he's been fantastic. His game hasn't dropped off at all since coming over from Europe, like some said it would. If anything, it's improved. Maybe it's a testament to the standard here. Maybe he's just that far above every player in this league that he can show like that. But, the guy looks hungry. I mean, he played almost the exact same way against Columbus that we saw in the first half against Mexico, where he was collecting balls. He had 30 meters in front of him, and he was looking dangerous in the attack. And I think, he's on track for, a possible MVP season.
Jermaine Defoe missed this game with injury. You mentioned the possibility of him going to the World Cup. I took a look at the England striker situation in light of Jay Rodriguez's injury yesterday, and I suppose there's a possibility of that. But injury, I think, is going to be a greater concern for Toronto than whether or not Defoe goes to the World Cup. And to have him with a knock this early or with a hamstring tweak, first of all, what's his prognosis? Because I'll admit I haven't checked up on him. And two, can he really put in the amount of time that's going to make him as effective as he possibly could be in this league?
Yeah, I think that just amplifies the Bright DK injury too, the Achilles injury that Nigerian suffered in training camp. He was kind of that insurance policy until to Berto and Defoe if they went down. Defoe, in terms of his hamstring strain right now, they're having training today, so something should come out of that. All indications are that it was kind of minor, so I think the expectation is that he might take part in the Colorado game on the weekend. But you're absolutely right. The injuries, when you have 3 DPs, injury concerns are always one of the gambles you take in adding 3 DPs. But at the same time, Bezbatchenko, the GM, wants to get to the World Cup break in a good position, kind of look over the rosters, see what the club needs, and then go out and get some of those pieces.
Gilberto has sort of been pushed to the sideline, at least in terms of the spotlight, with Defoe and Bradley in the mix now, but he is going to be as crucial as anybody else to this team's success, especially if they don't get goals from Defoe every time out, or Michael Bradley, who might pop up for his fair share. How has he done to this point? How would you assess his progress, and is he going to live up to the billing that, again, was sort of pre-Bradley and Defoe?
Yeah, I think with Gilberto, I think a lot of people around the league or a lot of followers in other MLS cities, they aren't going to know too much about the Brazilian because he isn't scoring that many goals right now. He isn't scoring goals. But at the same time, it's interesting that you think a DP striker would be getting scrutinized for not scoring 4 games into the season, but everybody up here still loves him. I think it's kind of a testament to how he's been playing, and I think you have to watch him when he doesn't have the ball. You have to watch him. When Toronto doesn't have the ball, to understand that he's almost a two-way player, and that he's not your typical Brazilian striker that you expect to kind of take shifts off to not defend. He's active, he's dangerous in possession, and I think it's only a matter of time before he starts scoring as well.
There's some rumors leaking out there, and I'll admit I've asked for the allocation order, and somebody tried to help me out, but they've got 2 different orders, so I'm not even sure where we stand right now. First of all, is Toronto at the top of the allocation order? And second of all, does that mean that they're interested in a potential return of a couple of American internationals?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they're at the very top of the order. If they're not, they're close. Just speaking with Tim Nowicki and Bezbatchenko, they think that's going to be key. They think that around the World Cup, you're going to see players come back. You already have seen players come back that want playing time. Post World Cup, you might see players come back. And if you don't want that player, you still have the ability to trade that spot. Like you said, it's a bit bizarre, the allocation order right now, because at the same time, guys like Clint Dempsey and Michael Bradley seem to not have to go through it. So with other players not have to go through it. But my understanding is that they're at the top, and they think it's going to be valuable moving forward. Not to mention the 4 first-round draft picks they have in 2015, which sets them up real nicely. Is
that allocation or top allocation spot? Would they use it on Brek Shea if he returned?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much to put into the Brek Shea stuff. Whenever you get a GM and you're sitting down with him, you like to get as much out of him as you can. So I was having a discussion with Tim Bezbatchenko before the Columbus game, and I said, allocation order, how important is this going to be? And then you just kind of think about which players could come back. Of course, Brek Shea is struggling at Stoke City. They could be looking to loan him out again. Would he be looking for an MLS loan spell? So I threw that name out to Bezbatchenko, and he just says, yeah, 100% we'd be interested in a player like Brek Shea. He's dynamic. Why wouldn't we be? At the same time, TFC has 3 designated players, so the cap would have to be right, the salary number would have to be right. But yeah, I mean, TFC, I think would like a lot of teams would be interested in Brek Shea, and it'd be interesting to see if they would act on that if he became available. And of course, they were at the top of the allocation order, which I think they are.
It's so difficult to sort of lay out what this season might be for Toronto FC. Again, Kurt, the issue of Michael Bradley's absence, which is a guarantee, the possible issue of Defoe's absence if he gets selected by England to go to the World Cup, those will have a major impact on the season. But at this point, I mean, one of the questions coming into the year was whether or not Ryan Nelson could handle this group and be successful. Last year wasn't a good campaign. Has he shown you enough that he can navigate all of these potential pitfalls? And again, it's unfair to say Toronto FC MLS Cup contender just because they spent that money, but there are expectations.
Yeah, I mean, on the Ryan Nelson point, I think Saturday, he did start to show some kind of tactical awareness of what this club needs to do on the road in certain environments against certain teams to win. I mean, even Michael Bradley himself told me after the game that we did our homework. That's why we came in. We knew they're important players. We knew how to play against this team, and the results showed that. Not MLS Cup contenders yet, in my opinion. I mean, I think that loss at RSL showed that this team is still going to have difficulties traveling. Like most MLS teams, they're still going to struggle against some of the league leaders. They're still going to have their ups and downs. And Ryan Nelson, he's trying to make that clear to everybody that this is not, this isn't the end product that you're going to see. We're going to continue to gel, he says. And by the end of the year, they just want to be in a spot they just want to be in the playoffs and in the conversation. And you never know. If they pick up a few pieces, they could be dangerous. How much
of a thought is the style of this team? I mean, you get Defoe, he's a clinical finisher. You get him the ball in the right places, he's going to score. Obviously, Michael Bradley is a box-to-box guy, can sort of do it all in midfield. But is there any real thought to how this team is going to play? They're not going to turn themselves into Barcelona or RSL overnight, but is that even something they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, they say they want to do that, but at the same time, I don't think they've held the majority of possession in any game they've played this year, yet they have 9 points and are sitting in the Southeastern Conference. I mean, we've seen that they're capable of being dangerous on the attack, on the counter. They have players that are dangerous on the counter. I think from a Ryan Nelson team, you're going to see a team that sets up defensively first, figures out how it wants to defend, is hardened, is capable of going on road and grinding out those kind of results, is capable of grinding out those results without the kind of possession and then nicking the goal the other way with their quality. So are they ever going to be an RSL type, keep the ball on the ground and complete 30 passes before scoring? I'm not sure. But what they're doing right now has been effective.
They have Colorado on the weekend and Toronto. This is a team that scored 5 penalties for their first 5 goals and then gets 2 wonder strikes from Jose Mari on the weekend in Vancouver. What specific challenges have you looked ahead? What specific challenges does Colorado present?
Well, I think at the first, Ryan has to, Nelson has to get things right at the back. He's going to have a big decision coming up. With Caldwell coming back, of course, you got to start your captain in the back. But if Donald Henry's back, it's going to be a big decision. Do you go back with the 20-year-old Canadian, or do you bring in a guy like Orr, who showed extremely well on the weekend, and Finkel, fiddle with your lineup a little bit? Colorado's a dangerous team. Sanchez, they have dangerous players up top. A perennial kind of playoff team the last few years. It's going to be a test. I think one of the biggest tests is going to be on the ground screw to get that field right at Emo Field, because that's kind of the great leveler. If you don't get that field right at Emo Field, it's going to look like the DC game where it was kind of all mucked up and the first team to score won.
Kurt, it just occurred to me. I haven't talked to you since we've had some movement on the expansion of BMO Field. I know we've talked about it in the past, and there was an interesting notion of a Great Lakes World Cup, which I don't completely understand. But where does the expansion of the stadium sit right now? Is it going ahead? And I guess the second part of that is, how does that affect TFC directly? Are the fans okay with it?
Yeah, just to go back to the Great Lakes thing, man, that's hilarious. It just kind of goes to show you the circus that Toronto City Council is, of course, with our mayor and then a couple of the councilors up here not knowing what they're talking about. That actually came from a mayoral candidate who was pumped about BMO Field possibly hosting World Cup games. She mentioned something about a Great Lakes World Cup where Detroit would be involved, I think, in Chicago. I have no idea. I was just kind of making fun of that. In terms of the stadium, still seems to be on track. Toronto City Council actually passed a motion to give the $10 million MLSE was looking for to revamp the stadium. Fans are mixed. I mean, you have your diehard supporters who want to see this stay a soccer-specific stadium. Of course, the CFL's Argonauts would be moving in if this goes through. But then there's those fans that understand that BMO Field is really just a little better than Columbus Crew Stadium, and that the team's payroll, $100 million payroll over 4 to 5, 6 years is the stadium is not befitting of this team. They need to get a roof. The inclement weather is constantly affecting this team through the early months of the season. I stand behind it. The question is, will the pitch hold up with a football team and a soccer team playing on it? We'll see. They're going to bring in a hybrid surface, so we'll see if that helps.
Curtis Larson from the Toronto Sun giving us his insight into TFC and their MLS campaign to this point. I appreciate the time as always, Curtis. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Yeah, anytime.
There he goes. Curtis Larson. Follow him on Twitter Kurtlarsun. Kurt Larson. Son spelled as the name of the paper he writes for. Curtis Larson. Good guy covering TFC up there in Toronto. Native of Kansas City, I believe. Curtis Larson. So he's got all of the MLS bases covered. All right, I think that, and I have this vague recollection because I do a show every day, and sometimes my memory just does not hold up. But I have this vague recollection of playing a song on this show that I said was the World Cup song, and I think I was completely wrong about that. I think that somebody had tricked me on YouTube, and it wasn't the World Cup song at all. But I think I have a World Cup song. And this may not be a new release. This may not be new to the soccer world. Maybe you already were aware that this was out there. But Pitbull, because, man, that guy's agent is just cleaning up. Pitbull is everywhere. Pitbull's in everything. Pitbull's doing beer ads. He's doing soda ads. He's probably doing cell phone ads, doing long-distance phone ads. I don't know what he's doing. Doing everything. And he's apparently selling records and being popular because he's the World Cup song, official World Cup song guy with Jennifer Lopez and other people. Here's your World Cup song. Okay. You know, it kind of ties in with the Miami thing. Pitbull's a Miami guy, right? Miami soccer guy, Pitbull. So in order to counter the op-ed piece from Luther Campbell that came out today, we should just go to Pitbull. He's a soccer guy, right? Making music for FIFA or whoever's. It is FIFA, right? The official World Cup song from Pitbull. I'm assuming there's no curse words in this song. Gotta be family friendly at FIFA. It's okay. It's pretty standard fare these days. I'll get rid of that. What do you guys care about the World Cup song at all? Does anybody care about the World Cup song? I remember Waving Flag, but that wasn't even the official song. The Kanan song. That was like Coca-Cola's song for the World Cup. And we had the Waka Waka thing from Shakira. Shakira, who's not involved this time around. It's on her continent. The World Cup is on her continent, and Shakira can't get a little bit low, or you just can't bring her back twice in a row. She's too busy having kids with PK. She can't take the time out to make a World Cup song this time. I mean, look, and this is the thing about the Kanan song. At least Kanan, even if it wasn't the official World Cup song, it was more popular and people liked it better, and it was by an African artist, which was nice because the World Cup was in Africa. Be completely okay with having the World Cup song this time around by someone from South America. Don't you think? I mean, Brazilian preferably. But it's from someone from South America. Pitbull's Cuban, by the way, if you were wondering. Which is fine. I mean, hey, big ups to the Cuban community, but shouldn't this be like some kind of local flavor for the official World Cup song? We get something Brazilian? I got some Brazilian music in my Spotify. It's all about Pele. But we could play some Brazilian music. No, I'm not going to do that. I don't have it up right now. Take requests here. It's request time at Soccer Morning. Kiss and World Cup songs. That's what we're doing today. Phone lines open 347-756-6276. Give me your thumbs up, thumbs down. What do the radio stations say when they play a new song? You got to have a kiss it or diss it, that kind of thing. World Cup song, kiss it or diss it. you got to give me an opinion on that. Definitely, any thoughts on Atlanta and the Terminus Legion guys showing up? Those guys did a great job of representing Atlanta and giving us their take on why this team can be successful. Of course, they're local, they're soccer fans, they're behind it, they believe it can be successful. Again, got to prove it. Arthur Blake's got to step up. He's got to put his money where his mouth is. He's got to show that he's committed to soccer in a way that Robert Kraft has not shown he is committed to soccer right now. Robert Kraft dumped a lot of money into this league. Maybe Robert Kraft thinks he's still skating on that credit that he built up in the early part of the decade. Arthur Blank he's not gonna have that luxury. He needs to put his money in right now. We'll see about that. Again, 8 days until this reported announcement. Nothing yet from the league. Nothing yet from the Falcons organization, who will undoubtedly be behind the actual organization of the announcement. Arthur Blank doing a Q&A and on the radio in Atlanta today. Jason Longshore dropped that news. Go ask him questions. Go ask him questions. Apparently, Shakira did release an unofficial World Cup song. Well, good for Shakira. Good for Shakira. Gringo Mark says, play the Rio theme. You probably know it by now. Yeah. Rio is massive in my house. The movie Rio. With the birds. With the guy from The Social Network as the voice of the bird. Every single day, my kid demands to watch that movie. He's 5. He can get away with it. I don't let him watch it every time. Not that kind of parent. But he demands to watch. And it's now that the music has infected him to the point where he wants to be listening to the music all the time, whether he's watching the movie or not. So now I've got like Rio songs and Mashkenada playing in my house all the time, which is fine. It's a little culture for him. A little bit more culture than standard American pop music or whatever. Doug says, love it or shove it. That's good. Kiss it or diss it, love it or shove it. Which one, guys? World Cup anthem. World Cup song from Pitbull featuring Jennifer Lopez, Claudia, whatever. I don't know her. Officially backed by FIFA. Shakira with an alternative song out there. I got to go find that one. In other news, they didn't cover this yesterday. Chris Hughton, manager of Norwich City, was fired this weekend or Sunday. I believe he was dismissed. Chris Hughton, the last manager of color in the Football League. And in the aftermath of Hughton's dismissal, and there's no arguing, there's not really a significant argument to be made that Hughton deserved to keep his job. I mean, Norwich decided that he was expendable and that they weren't going in the right direction and they were afraid of relegation. Fine. Make that decision. I'm not going to sit here and say Chris Hughton should have kept his job. But what's happened in the aftermath of Chris Hughton losing his job is a renewed interest in the fact that there is zero diversity in the managerial makeup of English football. There are no managers of color in the top 4 divisions of English football. And everybody's got something to say on this. I read something by Andy Thomas and Alexander Netherton. I saw Shaka Hislop weighed in on this. Is there a call, a legitimate reason? Is it time for English football to move to something like the Rooney Rule? That's the NFL's rule that requires teams, when there is a vacancy in either an executive position, a front office position, or in a coaching position, that they have to interview a person of color, a candidate of color. Now, it's affirmative action in terms of the interviewing process. But what it does, and you think, okay, well, that's, teams are just going to interview a guy and get it over with. That happens. That has happened. But what the effect of the Rooney Rule has been on the NFL, and it's been a pretty clear effect, is it gives qualified candidates who might not otherwise get their foot in the door, because let's be honest and frank about this, there remains some institutionalized racism in English football, and I'm not going to cast stones. There's problems over here too. Well, I am casting stones, but I'm going to admit that there are problems in America still, especially in sports, especially in college football and other places similar to that. What it does is it gives an opportunity for a qualified individual to get his foot in the door, to sit down in front of the decision makers and make his case and show that he can do the job. Impress the guy who's hiring. May not have otherwise gotten a chance. And again, not because he's not qualified, but because he is of color. Now, Vince is throwing up he's being a little pedantic here. Pellegrini is Latino. I doubt he identifies as white. All right, Vince. When I say person of color, does Manuel Pellegrini present as a person of color? Whether he's Latino or whatever. I understand that's some diversity. How many black managers are in English football right now with Chris Hughton gone? How many black managers are there? How many black managers have been given an opportunity over the last 10 years? And yeah, some of them have been, the ones that have been given the opportunity failed in their jobs. Fine. That does not mean that there isn't a problem. That's the issue. Forget the whether or not Pellegrini is white or whether or not some of these guys are of a persuasion other than Caucasian. That's not really the point. The point is, especially within the English football community, and look, they're more than willing to hire the same white English managers over and over again. They're willing to just give that retread. White English football coach, white English. And look, tell me there aren't qualified individuals. There aren't people who have gone through the coaching, haven't gotten their coaching badges, people who haven't been players, who understand the game on an intimate level, who couldn't be successful. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I hope to be able to look into this issue a little bit more rather than just me talking about it in the future. We'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get Shaka Hislop on, a guy with a solid insight into that issue. There you go. Last thing I'll touch on. Saw this morning, and I know for the romantics, the traditionalists, even those of us who aren't Hull fans, when a new owner steps in, and we saw it with Cardiff, what Vincent Tan did with that team, switching the colors from blue to red, changing the badge, all of that. When a new owner steps in to a team that's got 100 years of history and changes things, people get upset. And the whole city issue, you know this, is that SM Alum wants to change the name of the team to Hull Tigers. Not Hull City AFC. Hull Tigers. Now, I think for American sensibilities, particularly those of you or those of us who are not in tune with English football, it seems like a small change. They're already the Tigers. They're already called the Tigers. They have a tiger on their badge. What's the big deal? Well, again, it's history. It's tradition. The name isn't Hull Tigers. The name is Hull City AFC. So LM, look, the FA has already recommended that the name change not go through, and now LM has released results of a poll. Here's the story from Reuters. Hull City season card holders have narrowly voted in favor of owner SM Alum's plan to change the Premier League club's name to Hull Tigers, despite the FA looking poised to block the move. Excuse me. Now, the number of people polled was just over 5,000. 2,565 of those eligible voted yes to Hull Tigers, and 2,517 voted to keep the current name. So look, a majority, fine. Not exactly an overwhelming mandate to change the name, guys. And for me, it's less about what the name is, because I'm not tied to AFC, Hull City AFC. I'm tied to the fans and what the fans want. Everton listened to the fans when their badge got a negative reaction. I know this is his club, and I know in the modern sporting context, owners get to do what they want with their clubs. And I do wonder if fans would be willing to trade better prominence, a stronger team, more likely to stay in the Premier League, for a name change. Or if the name trumps all of that. Be interesting. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you very much to Grant Wall, Jason Longshore, Daniel Monroe, and Curtis Larson. Be sure you go to soccermorning.com. Help support the show. It is incredibly important. Incredibly important that you help support the show at soccermorning.com. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors' friends, tell your Facebook friends, tell your telephone friends, tell your MySpace friends, whatever. Do all of that. Follow me on Twitter, DavisJSN. The show is Soccer Morning. Thanks to Trevor. Talk to you guys. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Wednesday. We'll talk tomorrow. Thanks to our friend Iggy the Silverback for our KISS playlist. We'll talk to you guys. Bye.